Thank you for listening to the Magenta Maven. In this episode, I got to interview the beautiful Brittany Moore. Hope you enjoy. So I'm here with the beautiful Brittany Moore. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Miami, Florida.
And what were you like as a kid?
I think I was always eccentric. I was raised by my parents till I was 14. And then I moved in with my grandparents for my teenager years because they moved to a small town. And I just didn't like it there. And then I lived in Miami the rest of the time with my grandparents.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I have two sisters. One is 4 years younger than me, and the other one is 12 years younger than me.
And where did you go to school?
Everything was in Miami. Most of my schooling was there. We lived in Tennessee for a little while, but I graduated from Southridge High School. I did my hair schooling down there in Miami.
What did you want to be as a child?
I always wanted to be a hairdresser. My mom was a hairdresser. I grew up in the hair salon, and I still am a hairdresser 30 years later.
Oh, wow. So were your parents, were they strict when you lived with them?
You know, my parents worked a lot, and they always gave us a strong foundation. And, my dad was never, I was raised by my stepdad from about a year and a half on. And, they worked so hard to provide and give us kids, what we had. It wasn't easy. But I think that's why I do what I do now. Like I worked so hard because that's all I know. That's all my parents did.
Yes, I understand. I'm the same way. I keep at least two jobs and never always have something going on. What was school like for you?
I was always so feminine, and school wasn't easy. It was hard. And, it wasn't as socially accepted then as it is now. So I think I always had a hard time in school.
Did you have any like role models when you were in school?
I always look, when I was in my junior year, so I guess I was about 15, I was in the VOTEC program, part of the high school. So I was already working in a hair salon. So I really was over school by the time high school came around. I just did it to because I wanted to be a hairdresser so bad and get my license. And, that's what was important to me. So, my teacher, I remember her name was Mrs. Pilgrim, and she was always great. And, I always looked up to her because, she gave me a good foundation.
When did you come out, come out first, not as trans?
I was about 15. And it wasn't that I came out. They found out. I had this pen pal back when you wrote letters, and him and I used to write letters, and they found it. And I had my own telephone in my room, and I came home, and my grandparents took my telephone away, and I was devastated. And my mom flew down, and she was like, "You can't, and this can't be." And I was like, "How can you not know?" And so, it was a little rough, but in the end, everybody, loves me and we're good,
Oh, yeah. Tell me about the first time doing drag.
It was my first boyfriend. He was older than me and he loved drag. And I remember sneaking into the nightclubs, and I was like 16, and you see the drag queens and you were like, oh my gosh. And I was like, I want to do that. And so he put me in drag for the first time, and he knew a lot of people. And so he always was able to introduce me. And, but it was, that my grandma it's around my house somewhere. She had this picture of me and her when I looked like just the only crazy person. But you got to start somewhere,
Oh yeah. And were you trans before you started doing drag, or was that after?
Well, that came later. It came later on.
Do you remember what the first song was, and what you wore the first time you did drag?
I wore some blue dress, and my first song was Vision of Love from Mariah Carey.
Oh, and where did you get your name?
My very first boyfriend and his best friend. And so they named me Brittany, and then the Moore came later on, and that's how it worked out. And it always stuck. It worked out fine. So in the beginning, they used to call me Brittany, Brickney. That was so hard.
And so I know you do a lot of pageants. When did you start doing those?
I started when I was young in my career, and then I stopped competing for like 10 years because my life was so out of control, just between alcohol and drugs and partying and all this stuff. And I needed to get myself together. And I even quit shows for about 5 or 6 years. And so, I never won anything in my early years of pageantry. And I always knew that when the time was right, I would start competing again when my life wasn't such a mess. And so once I did that, that was the catalyst of me doing well in pageants and eventually winning and starting to capture, lifelong dream.
Do you remember what your very first pageant was?
It had to have been some of the club pageants in Miami. I just I can't remember exactly which one it was. But it was, there was a lot of bar pageants back then. So like, if you wanted to be anybody or anything, you had to start competing and go to pageants and be seen. And so it was the smaller bar pageants, I'm sure, but I couldn't tell you which one.
And I know that you are still doing pageants. What are your current titles that you have?
Right now, I'm not reigning anything. I mean, before the COVID thing started, I was getting ready for Miss Gay USA Classic, which is for mature women over 40, and so I was doing that, and so that's postponed until May of next year, and so I got time to relax and enjoy some things before I go.
And how many would you say that you've won so far?
I counted, like, sometimes in my dreams I count, and I did like probably over like 15 or so, maybe more. I don't know. I didn't coming back into pageantry, I started to win a lot, and so I probably lost more than I've won, but I mean, this last go around has been really good to me.
What do you look for, like, in a pageant system before you actually go to do it? Like, what system, or what are you looking for when you're doing those?
A lot of people ask me, I've asked that before. These two kind of go hand in hand.
Johnny.
Okay, that's my grandbaby.
Oh, I understand.
Say hi, Anlin. I think when I look for when I'm going to compete pageant, I always compete with my heart. And I've never asked who the judges were. I never asked how much the prize money is. I just know that that's where I want to go. That's what's important to me. And that's what I do. And so then, I work hard to achieve it. When I became Miss Heart of Florida, and when I became Miss Heart of Florida, it took me 3 times. When I won All-American Goddess, it took me 3 times. Miss Renaissance took me 2 times. I've been to Continental twice, and, I'll go back when, I feel like time is right and I'm ready. So it just takes, I always go with my heart, because I don't think you should compete just because somebody called you and said, oh, by the way, you need to do this pageant. Never worked out well for me that way.
That was one of my questions I think you about answered, was what system have you previously competed in that you would like to conquer?
Definitely Continental. And I have never had the opportunity to win the big 3, which is Gay USA, Continental, Entertainer of the Year. And so that still is a goal for me. And I'm working on some things, going back to what I was telling you in the beginning, I'm working on some things personally. And once I get where I feel like, okay, that's good, my brain can focus on the other. I just, I don't compete well if things aren't really in a good place.
Oh, yeah. And with this COVID thing, that's kind of put a strain on everybody.
It has, but it also changes your perspective on, what's important. Where do you want to go? What do I want to do?
For sure. And before, I know that now you're the show director at Mary's, but where were you at?
I was working at the Metro with Sonia, because I had just come back and doing, shows again. And so Sonia and I were at the Metro, and, I've worked on and off the Metro my entire career, but that's where I was. But, I've only been back doing shows for 10 years now. And so 9 of them have been at Mary's, and we're going on our 9-year anniversary.
Oh, yeah. And how did you end up from Miami here in Jacksonville?
Ooh, the boyfriend I was telling you about, this is a funny story. The boyfriend I was telling you about moved here because we were broke up, and he came down to get me. We were going to try to get together. I came back here, and then we lived at Sandra Todd's house. I slept on the floor. He cheated on me And I'm not going to mention his name because we all know him. And him, and then we broke up. And I stayed at Sandra's house, and Sandra kicked him out, and he moved back to Miami. And the funny thing is, we're all friends now, so none of that matters. But that's how I got here. I never left. I moved with a duffel bag. That's all I had. I had nothing.
Oh wow! So you were working at the Metro, and then how did you end up getting involved with the opening of the Hamburger Marys?
Well, Gary and I we've known each other for 15 years. And Gary used to bring his kids into the hair salon, and he used to come in all the time and cut his hair. And then I hadn't seen him for years. And to make a long story short, he came in, got his hair cut, and eventually we ended up going on a date. And we've been together ever since. And one of the first Florida tours I went on was about 4 or 5 days long. And he went with me and went to the Marys in Tampa. And a couple of months later, he said, "I'm going to open a Marys," and told me, "You're full of shit." And his sister and brother invested with him, and they opened the Marys here, and then I took on the show director role.
So what is it like to be a show director?
It's harder than people think. I think that you have to make decisions that are best for the business sometimes, that you think are best for the business because the people trusted you in that position. And James Brown, which is an old friend and mentor of mine who died about 15 years ago, and he was the owner of Metro before Jerry Rosenberg, and Jerry's best friend, told me your business has no emotion. And so being friends with so many people for so many years, I'm put in a position to make tough decisions that aren't always going to be the most liked decisions, but I have to do what I think is best for the show. And but I also, have learned from some of the, great places like the Baton, Parliament House, and you watch the production value of some of those shows. If you look at Play in Nashville and in Louisville, you learn things, and you try to take bits and pieces and put things into your show that you think is going to work great. And you got to know, you have to know your audience, and our audience demands a certain thing. We started out a certain way. And when we first opened, it was Lashes, Alexis, Sonia, me, Sindel. We're the ones that started in the beginning, building the place. And later on, we brought in the boys, which at the time was Kyle and Rico. And it has evolved to the show that it is now.
Oh, yeah. Adding them on there kind of gives it a little extra on there, because that's something that people want to see around here too, just as well as the queens and everything.
Absolutely. And they've built a great name for themselves.
Oh yeah. So what are the best resources that's helped you along the way, the show director?
I think you can't be afraid of having people in the show. And I don't like to say the word better, but you got to have people in the show that challenge you to do different things, or have, everybody has their place in the show. And when I book a show, it's because each act is usually a little bit different. And sometimes the owners don't always agree with me. And, they're like, well, we want to see so-and-so. But that particular person works great for the show, but might not be good for that particular weekend. And so you got to have a show that balances. You got to have, a Sandra Todd, a big, larger than life personality. You got to have a dancer. You got to have, somebody that has fabulous costumes. You got to have, probably somebody who's sexy and naked and beautiful, and, having a boy in there, that'll give you a balanced show. So I always feel like you got to have people in there that, I can learn from, and I'm not afraid of. Like when you put somebody let's just, for example, Queen Bee in the show, some people go, oh, I don't want to go behind her because she's going to dance and be so great. But I don't mind, because I know that my show is going to be different. And, I'm solid and confident where I'm at. And so you got to just have a good balance and people in the show that just bring something great. Because I think it's a huge compliment to the show director at the end of the night. They never mentioned names, but, the bartender go, that show was fantastic. So I've done my job when they say that.
So what advice would you give someone that's wanting to pursue a similar drag career, or, in pageantry?
Well, I think they kind of go hand in hand, and they kind of don't. You could be an entertainer your entire career, and many have, and many will continue and have never won a pageant in their life. You got to have something to fall back on. I think that, my saving grace during the time of COVID is that I've been a hairdresser, and I'm doing really well. And, even though salons are closed, I have that to fall back on. So when the restaurants closed early, I had a little bit of income coming in still until they close the salons. So I think you got to have something to fall back on, because yes, you can make money full time at this, but also there's a time when, you may need it to fill in and supplement your income. I mean, if you're going to be a pageant queen, take the time to learn the craft. Take the time to put together basic categories. People ask me all the time, and most newcomers, I tell them, no, you need to wait. I think you got to put together a good talent. You got to put together a good gown. You're always going to have those two things, most of the time, be in any pageant you enter. So if you don't have those already in your arsenal when it's time to use them, then you're putting something together from scratch, and that is great in its own, but it's hard. So, build those kind of things, and then you can start entering and then start tweaking and going, this worked for me, that didn't work for me. And if you're going to do shows and you want to get into show business, you got to do the talent contest. You need to show up and support the shows that you want to be in, and don't be afraid to ask the show director, can I do a number in the show? I mean, I have kids that I do that for all, quite a bit. And, you let them, I may not give them a Friday, Saturday right away, but they hotspot on a Thursday or a Sunday, and I'm more than willing to help the ones that want to help themselves.
Oh yeah, help get them built up. What is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Oh goodness, that's a tough one. I think lately is being true to myself, and understanding that that I matter, because I think that when you spend a lot of time putting everybody else before you, because I want to fix everybody's problems and fix everything, then I get lost in that. And so, if I can be good to myself and take care of myself, then I can be good to everybody else. But if I'm too busy worrying about taking care of everybody else and then I don't take care of me, then I become somebody you don't want to be around.
Oh,
That's
I think that works around with every.
But I think that's a tough lesson. It comes with, with being, getting a little bit older.
So, what is an interesting thing about you that we wouldn't learn from your friends?
Believe it or not, I think my relationship with God, I think a lot of my friends don't know how hard I work on my relationship with God, and I work for his, guidance and his support. I mean, if you're really, really close to me, which, without hurting anybody's feelings that may listen, I don't have that many people that I let that close to me that would know that.
I had, I read a lot of stuff, especially things that everybody posted on there, and here lately, and I actually had told Nick, I was like, I noticed that in you just from your post that you,
recently, I have, and during this COVID thing takes you on a journey, and most mornings I get up at early now, and so I take this long run and long walk, and it's such a time of reflection. And, when I got into recovery and when I decided to get clean and sober about 5.25 years ago, I always had a foundation of God, but they always tell you find a God of your understanding. And once you find that, you can grow your relationship. And so my relationship with God has just grown to a different level. And during this time has really helped me understand that, yes, the COVID's here, and yes, the virus is rampant, and yes, we don't have all the answers, and we probably never will. But what I can, and I can only speak for myself, what I can lay solid on is that I know that God's going to take care of me, and he's going to always guide me and provide for me. And, even when you don't think it, that he's going to, he will. And he knows what's going to happen tomorrow before we do. So when you can get into that place, I think that really has helped.
It helps keep you a little more together, especially with this, like you said, with this going on.
Yeah, it's the craziest thing we've ever seen. We don't know any of it. I mean,
nobody, I don't think, has seen this in their lifetime.
And we won't ever. I mean, in 100 years, they haven't seen this.
If you had the world's attention for 30 seconds, what would you say?
I had the opportunity to meet Winona in early March, who's an incredible country singer for some of you young folks who don't know. And she said something profound because she figured me out. She knew I was trans and all of that. But she said, I wish the world would love and understand you more. And, that's what I wish. I don't, you don't always have to agree, but you do have to, love on us, because love has is unconditional, and we put all this stuff on it. But I think if the world would just open their eyes and love on one another without putting any type of judgment on, I think we'd be in a better place.
So if you had to be on a shipwreck on a desert island, but your human needs such as food and water were taken care of, what 2 items would you want to have with you?
Coffee and rice.
Oh yeah, I gotta have my coffee too, especially.
Oh my gosh!
I know that Mary's has opened back up. So, what things do y'all have going on? What's going to be in store? What projects do y'all have going on?
Well, in the midst of all of this, before all this happened, we were planning our 9-year anniversary, which actually just happened on the 5th of May, and the weekend we were celebrating was going to be the 28th, 29th, and Nina West was going to be our special guest.
Oh my gosh!
So we have moved that to July 25th. And we probably will do some sort of celebration at the end of the month. And I mean, right now we're hoping people come out, with the limited seating and everything going on, it hasn't been, as busy as we're normally used to. I'm grateful that I get back on stage and stuff. And, we're trying to maybe tweak hours, nights of the week, things like that until we can get opened back up fully. So it's a challenging time right now.
I know that y'all have been, performing on camera, but that is just nowhere near as being able to see it.
No, virtual shows are rough.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine, because you never know, how that, especially when they're live like that, and it seems like it would just throw your whole time.
Well, and you have to, really learn how to produce them and tweak them. And I mean, I think there's some people out there doing some amazing shows. I think Axel Andrews is one of my favorite shows out there right now. I mean, the way he's produced that show and made videos, and it's great to watch. I mean, it's a huge amount of effort and work.
Where can our listeners connect with you online?
Well, my Facebook obviously is Brittany T. Moore, and my Instagram is Brittany Moore Jax, JAX. That's really only the 2 platforms that I use.
And then Hamburger Mary's, I know they have.
Oh yeah, Hamburger Mary's Jax, and Hamburger Mary's Jax Facebook and Instagram are both the same name.
I'm sure that during your life you experienced some highs and lows. What lessons do you wish that you have known earlier?
I don't think you become the person you are today without those lessons. And so, I think mostly I wish I would have known that drugs and alcohol didn't matter, and I didn't need those things to have friends and relationships and be happy. I think that part of my life, I would have loved to have known that before doing that. Because I think it would have made a difference. When you talk about pageants, I should have been doing what I'm doing now in my much younger years. But, the flip side is that, I have a lot more knowledge on how to behave and act appropriately. If I'd have done it in my 20s, I wouldn't have. But I mean, I probably, one of the things I wish I would have known then. But, you can't do anything about that now.
I understand that. And one other thing is there something that, if you were in my shoes, that you would like to ask yourself?
I think that
may have missed.
Sometimes I'm just, I think sometimes I'm misunderstood. I think sometimes, I come across a little tough, a little abrasive. I'm short with words during my text, and it's not necessarily, who I am or how I feel. DeRay Saunders is one of my close friends, and she always says to me, if people walked a day in your shoes, they would understand, and some, when things are going full force and I'm, Brittany the hairdresser, Brittany the fiance, Brittany the granddaughter, Brittany the grandmother, and I have to be the show director at Mary's and deal with all of that. Sometimes things come across the wrong way that, didn't mean to. So, I'm trying to be more mindful of that, but I think a lot of times I'm, misunderstood. So the question probably is, why do you think you're misunderstood or something? Probably would have been a good one to ask. But, I think it was great. You've done a great job.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Yeah, I understand how that is. It's like you've got so much stuff going on, you're just trying to think of what's going on like right then, and that you're not really trying to push somebody away. You're just trying to get what you need to get done, like, at that moment. But then after it's over with, then, it's, that's it. You know what I mean? Then you ask whatever.
Because there's no emotion in a text message. And then, I may just text back one word, and you're like, well, goodness, you bitch. And it's like,
I understand. I worked with y'all at Mary's long enough to know that that I got how everybody is working. Well, thank you very much for doing this.
No, thanks for having me.
I would like to thank my guests for joining me and letting me interview them. If you have any questions for future entertainers, please leave me a message at anchor.fm/TheMagentaMaven, MAVAN. Also, please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at The Magenta Maven. And thank you for listening. Until next time.